Okay, so this is a commentary partly on the very small essay that I wrote with the title um, The Return of the Stray. The title has a Gnostic undertone in that the stray is one who has gone out of the region um, which is proper to them and come into um, a accidental place. Um, so I want to explicate this um, in connection to an attempt to take over the Heiddeger position so best as I can, and possibly through an interpretation of Heiddeger. Um, I think there's a chance also to mention the continuing subject matter of in Strauss, the Epicurean and the um, uh, reverse of the Epicurean, which in a way would be the Socratic, taken as the two principled ways of understanding the Platonic good. So we have to go back behind that split in the idea of the Platonic good. Um, ultimately, so I think the simplest statement of this problem of so-called Epicureanism is that what it means is that the good is either about pleasure or it's about knowledge. And so the Socratic side is to say that it's about knowledge, and that when we correctly show ourselves the way to knowledge, that means at the same time um, that the practical ceases to be the merely taken to be practical of opinion and becomes the good. Um, so if I speak of going back behind knowledge in Heiddeger, then at the same time this means that the contrast between knowledge and pleasure has been superseded. So in the criticism of Heiddeger with Husserl is subtle, and what it involves, as we looked at a little bit, is this so-called analogy on the senses, consciousness as an analogy on the senses, and Heiddeger wants to go back behind that. So already in the Sophist, we have these fine distinctions between being, which is basically taken as just that something, say a tree, is there, and then the tree not as the subject of ratiocination, knowledge in the sense of ratiocination, which Socrates is interested in. So then, in order to have that, Socrates always introduces something like, you have to remember what you said before, and then something along the lines of an approach to at least being scientifically aware, science taken as in connection to knowledge, in connection to what was just said. of difficulties like contradiction. Contradiction should be a red flag at the very least in this kind of discussion. And then you have the notion of identity. So identity is already distinguishable in Plato from the bare ousia, which in Aristotle would be the primary substance rather than a secondary substance. The thing that you can point at rather than uh, the thing as an idea, rather than where idea means something a kind of, or idea means something like the problem of the one and the many, that the tree is there as a tree, but it can change and still remain a tree, and that therefore it's changing in its accidental details. So the question would be, in this question of how non-being can be, we have this, first we have this problem that the notion of identity seems to be set on an analogy with the notion of difference. So a tree is essentially different from a flower or from any other substance. So the identity can be said to say this thing belongs with other things that are like itself and not like other things. But it can also be said in a more subtle form that this thing is like itself. So, for instance, when Kant says the book is a book, the copula is can be meant to say the book is a book. This is a statement of identity. So there's the identity, there's the distinction, and these remain within the laws of thought and within ratiocination and within knowledge in the style of Socrates. But then there's this other position of the edge of that, where language is merely saying this being is. So it seems like Husserl has gotten out of the laws of thought and ratiocination in the sense of Socrates, Plato, and this is why Husserl is very anxious to say, I'm not doing what Plato was doing. And he also thinks maybe Heiddeger has mistaken something in him. He's written some of his letters. There's plaints on this point that he's been misunderstood. But what Heiddeger is saying is different. Heiddeger recognizes that Husserl has gotten out of the laws of thought to at least something like the primary substance, which is why Heiddeger says Husserl has his phenomenology is like what Aristotle was doing, and he convinced Husserl of that, and Husserl admitted it. But then we get to this other issue in Heiddeger, which is that, so I had a discussion where rarely you get these discussions where people, where the point is somebody's able to express a point clearly enough that the people kind of see it, the light of it. So somebody was maintaining on Facebook that not being is, or that nothing exists in some sense. But then the clarification was made that if we're speaking of nothing, so say we're speaking in the region of physis or nature, outside, exterior to ourselves, anything, a tree, whatever, but instead of the tree, nothingness, and then you say nothing is, nothing exists, and it seems to be a contradiction. But then the clarification is that nothing is, in that sense, the word is simply means nothing-ing, so nothing nothings. If we think so, whether nothing means a deprivation of something or not is unclear, what nothing really means. But in any case, when we say nothing is, the is suddenly changes its meaning, so that nothing is means nothing nothings. That is one step into what Heidegger's trying to get to. The next step is to say that everything that is can be taken as being in this positive sense, that nothings is a kind of positive way of stating that nothing, um, the nothing, just like anything else, can be stated positively. Then we have the idea that back behind that um, Dasein is somehow standing in an opening, which is not the opening in the same sense. So everything we can think of as an is appropriate to itself, but then we have to go back behind that to think of this is, which is always misspoken, because as soon as we think about it, we've stated it as a being, just as we can state nothing as a being. Um, that's part of what we're trying to go back to. And in this short essay, I tried to approach that through the specific route of showing what Socrates was trying to get to in leisure, in what is called leisure or school, schola, and what then the thinker would be trying to get to with relation to a new kind of leisure, which would be a freedom from language, which names each of these positions, such as nothingness and nothingness, nothing, and which is constantly bordered by grammar, for instance, that older languages take, many languages have gendered nouns, for instance, which no longer makes any sense to most people, as Nietzsche points out, but it was once taken quite seriously as a science when it was brought in, and we have all these vestigial features in languages. In that way, grammar looks like some kind of sign of language itself, as it were, a symptom of language's existence. Although, if I say existence, I'm already again straying from, in the sense of I'm naming language as something which is, rather than letting it be the house of being. Um, so there's a number of subtleties there, whether we can have a determination of language as the house of being, whether we're already confusing ourselves with that or not. Okay, so that in the upcoming discussion, running in tandem with the explication or exegesis, eisegesis of the short text, Return of this Stray, I'll try to give more candor to that and more exactitude as it demands.